for 2019 to Kate Barton on behalf of the Assembly Rooms Theatre. The beautiful room that you're in and the rest of this building cost £2.5 million to restore. The work was done by PH Partnership Architects and Stage Electrics. And there is a detailed account of the work in our spring 2020 bulletin number 88. And if any of you, for some reason, don't have one, there's some spare copies down on the front of the stage you can pick up later. A number of trustees were given a guided tour of the building, top to bottom, from Fly Tower to the green room in the basement. And we were so impressed that historical features had been preserved alongside modern functionality. I was privileged to announce the award at a gala evening here, which was held to celebrate the reopening early in 2020. But of course, we've been forced to wait for the actual presentation until now because of the pandemic. That was a great occasion for me. The bill was opened by Sir Thomas Allen, and then there were a load of very distinguished former Durham students performing, and then I brought the proceedings to a close. And I think I got the biggest round of applause of the night. People were really delighted that the Trust had bestowed this award on the Assembly Rooms Theatre. And I'm absolutely delighted now to hand over the actual plaque to Kate Barton, the theatre manager. I'll just show it to the camera. I think you'll just get a fairly shiny reflection, but you can have a look at it later. It's even got some fixing screws stuck on the back.
Even better.
Yeah. There you are.
Thank you
Kate.
so much,
Very
John.
well reserved. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Amazing. Ladies and gentlemen of the City of Durham Trust, I want to say a huge thank you on behalf of the university for this recognition and for holding your AGM here. It really feels like a very long time since this award was formally announced in January 2020, and I think we can all agree the world has changed so significantly since then. But 1 year and 9 months later, it is just as exciting. This theatre is part of Durham's story, and it's so special to me and hundreds of individuals who have passed through its walls and who have walked on this stage. So if I may, I'd like to say a few words about the building, its history and the renovation. So for those who don't know me, my name is Kate. I'm Senior Manager for the Performing Arts for Durham University and the current steward of this building. I attended university here as a student, fell in love with the city, the people and the theatre, and stayed. It's been a true honour to be part of the refurbishment and to share this building to showcase the best of emerging talent for the North East and for students and residents alike. So this theatre first appears on maps in 1600s. However, pre-1600s, we did find foundations here of ramshackled housing and lopsided structures that we think would have been part of a kind of the 1400s or so in that era. We also discovered an interesting structure that paused the renovation completely. In the workshop under the dressing rooms, there is currently the medieval defence wall for the city that we discovered there. And thanks to Durham University Archaeological Department, who came in and actually recorded all of this. We also discovered some animal bones, which were still visible teeth marks from dogs that had gnawed on them. And that was believed to have been when this area was likely stables for the construction of the cathedral, and that we've still got all the archaeological history and things right beneath our floors, over 2 meters below the basement floor level. We also found several medieval shoes, as of course is the tradition of leaving and hiding shoes in foundations and chimneys of old buildings. The rooms are clearly distinguished on a map from 1750, with the oldest surviving reference being in a newspaper from 1714. And this is part of the old town in that Edwardian period, which was known as the fashionable quarter. And it was at this point where it was known as the Assembly Rooms, or the Long Room in some histories, and held a very memorable ball in 1827, attended by the Duke of Wellington and Sir Walter Scott. I personally want to think that it was Sir Walter Scott who sat in these very hall and kind of pondered the kind of classic grey towers of Durham epithet, perhaps sat right here. It really is. At that point in 1800s, of course, assembly rooms massively increased in popularity as they were the meeting places of the upper class and a place to entertain for both sexes. Though apart from a theatre, there was no other spaces that you could kind of mingle in a formal nightclub, so to speak, for the young. In 1889, the premise was purchased by Thomas Rushworth of 61 Sadler Street. And since the destruction of the old Theatre Royal on further down Sadler Street, and the fact that, as it states in a newspaper, the woeful acoustics of Durham Town Hall, it was considered that this would be a prime location for a new theatre for Durham. So in 1891, the new Assembly Rooms Theatre opens its doors for the first time, formally converting the old Assembly Rooms into a theatre that you see today. Most of that renovation from 1891 still exists today. In fact, the rake that you're sat on in terms of the seating as it goes up is the same. The fly tower, which is there, we still have the same rigging system from the 1800s. We have replaced the rope, you'll be perhaps thankful to know. But all of that is still there and is still complete. The old trapdoor as well is still there, with a stage void that goes underneath it as well, with obviously minor alterations to make it far more usable for a modern day. So it was in this space really where we also discovered downstairs the old vaulted hall that it used to be. So the dressing rooms, which are still down there, used to be vaulted because it also used to be a pantry as well. For anyone who was here at the theatre could also have refreshments. We even found an old glass jar with Fentimans of Gateshead, and we have dated that glass jar to be a ginger beer bottle from 1900, which is fantastic to think that people have been enjoying local drinks here in this building for over 100 years. You'll also notice as well that the new lighting bars as well that I'm currently being lit with has also been renovated, and this side paneling is still the old original features. Unfortunately, we had to replace this one. This is a mimic because of the damp and the issues that we had there. So at the end of the century, animated pictures or films came into Durham, and this space, the theatre started becoming also a theatre/cinema space. And it was in this building that hosted the very first film for Durham, which was in 1903, which was The Great Train Robbery. And also in April 1913, the installation of the Duke of Northumberland as Chancellor of Durham University was also filmed and screened in here. So perhaps not so dissimilar to the current screening of graduations that we still do today. When war broke out, the latest news and the war from the news from the war was also portrayed here. So the screenings for the Empire were here to entertain patriotic subjects and were all the rage as people were thrilled to watch them and feel like they were doing their part for the war effort. 4 years down the line, obviously enthusiasm for the war waned and pictures became much more emotional in nature. In 1914, Tom, which was Mr. Rushworth's second son, enlisted in the August, and William, his first son, actually died in Newcastle of the same year. And when conscription was introduced in 1916, the theatre actually had to change its opening hours because it cut down that nothing could happen on a Sunday and everything needed to close by 9 p.m. At the end of the war in 1919, when restrictions on cinema and theatre opening hours had been abolished, evening performance were restored from 7 p.m. until 9 p.m. and pictures continued. However, in 1923, Thomas Rushworth's son, Tom, unfortunately passed away from a war-related illness, and less than a year later, Sir Thomas Rushworth himself passed away as well. He passed on the inheritance to the theatre and cinema to his daughter, who continued for another 7 years to continue to run pictures and performances within this space. But at that time, by 1930, areas of the building had started to fail, roof had started to crumble, and the revenue had started to dry up. So in the 1930s, the building was then purchased by the University of Durham. The 1930s then saw new renovations to the building. You'll notice that the external facade still has the 1891 top, and then the lower modern 1930s Art Deco windows, which was when the front of the auditorium and the front of the box office was then replaced and fixed. The caretaker's flat was also then increased in size, which reduced the capacity. At one point, the rake that you're sat on extended all the way to the back windows at the very back. So the back became the caretaker's flat with an extended living room area for people to enjoy. A new curtain track was put in as well for modern performances, as well as the stage pit as well got redeveloped in the 1970s. In the 1970s, also saw redevelopment of the theme dock, which is just to the left here, and that is where staging is stored. It is where we store scenery. It is where magical things move on and off the stage, really, and where the actors gather in trepidation before their line. Then in 1917, the University Estates and Facilities Department identified the assembly rooms as an area of concern. No real work had happened, or no real substantial work had done to the fabric of the building since that 1970s refurbishment. And it had started to tell. We were experiencing issues with the electrics within the building. We were experiencing damp everywhere. There was still asbestos in the basement. There was flooding as well in the external ones. And we also found out that there was zero foundations to the whole theatre. Everything was built purely on the concrete floor, which to say that if you're seating 200 people in here, you'd like to think that they're going to be structurally safe to sit. So it was identified that it needed to be refurbished. And in this refurbishment, as you said, it was a whole year of planning with PHP partnerships and significant other contractors, as well as project management from Durham University. And it meant that when we moved out for a whole year and 2 months, we then had to relocate everything, because as you can imagine, this theatre and below this theatre has storerooms, it's got lights, it's got sound. So we had to find homes for everything to live in a whole year, as well as supporting the nearly 100 productions that take place in here every year. Where were they going to go? Who was going to house them? And what was going to happen next? But in refurbishing this theatre, I've been constantly reminded of the duty of care to the students, to our alumni, to donors, to resident artists, but most importantly, our audiences. The history of the building in the refurbishment had to be protected, as I've spoken at length about. It is fascinating. It is truly a beating heart of the history of Durham in its arts and culture, and the oldest surviving theatre that is still here today, functioning, I should say. And I have felt the passion and pressure of generations of individuals before me to be able to continue this legacy within this space and allow it to continue to develop. So, fast forward, we reopened January 2020 and then closed 2 months later. A global pandemic, of course, meant that we had to close, but we actually became a cinema again for a very short period, where we hosted films for a lot of students who were stuck here over, maybe they've been international students or they came, from afar, and obviously in their households of their student halls, they didn't have any spaces to mingle with other households. So we opened this up as a tiny little private cinema to students to enjoy, as well as painting opportunities for the space below, even if we couldn't hold formal audiences. And now we are open again, and as you'll notice, there's now sanitizers around, masks, social distancing, of course, regular testing for the students and staff community, and CO2 monitors with advanced cleaning. And right now we are still putting on all of the shows that have been previously postponed to be back on. So moving forwards to the future, we are still emerging out of this as a department within the university for performing arts. And I can tell you that you can expect in here great things to come. We are still learning, we are still growing and developing, and we can't wait to really bring this theatre back to the community. As you move forward, you can expect high quality student work, professional touring productions, and community use of this wonderful space. Small regional theatres such as this should be protected, and they should be a place for students, emerging artists all across the region. They are a place to try, a place to get it wrong, a place to play. And really, it's a journey into the creative industry that starts here and then develops to perhaps a West End stage. Complementing the gala, we hope that this building will be a space for emerging talent, and this theatre welcomes anyone, a place to be entertained, a place to be inspired, and of course, a place to assemble. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your evening. And thank you so much for indulging myself in talking about this gorgeous building. I can talk all day. You don't need that. But as John has rightly said, the bar will be open after the show. So if anyone would like to stay for a drink and refreshment, I'll pre-warn you, it is an interval bar, so it isn't a huge space, but it is a little space if you would like to continue the conversations after your AGM. If anyone would like to access it, you can go up these stairs here, and then to the right, and then up those stairs again. If anyone would like to use the lift, we do actually have an accessible lift, which is just down those stairs as you entered. Just know it is an accessible lift, so you'll need to hold down the button, otherwise it won't move. So just to forewarn you, it's not broke, you just need to hold it down. And thank you very, very much.
Hey, thank you so much. That was an unexpected bonus history lesson, and also your enthusiasm for the future shone through. That's wonderful. We wish you all the best. Thank you. And we move on to Act 2 of this evening's performance.